The first light of dawn streaked across the Montana sky as Emily Mercer guided her battered Ford pickup through the gates of Fort Morrison. The truck's once blue paint had faded to a weathered gray, its bumper held together by baling wire and sheer determination. The guard at the checkpoint glanced at her papers, then at her plain face framed by brown hair, pulled back in a simple ponytail. His eyebrows lifted slightly. "Ma'am, you sure you're at the right place?" he asked, handing back her credentials. Emily nodded, once her hazel eyes giving away nothing. "I'm sure." The guard shrugged and waved her through. As she pulled away, she caught his reflection in the rearview mirror, already radioing ahead. She knew what he was saying. They hadn't expected someone like her. Fort Morrison housed the Advanced Military Intelligence Training Program, the most rigorous officer training in the United States military. Established in 1975 after the fall of Saigon, it was created to develop a new generation of intelligence operatives who could navigate the treacherous waters of the Cold War. The Soviet threat loomed larger than ever, and America needed eyes and ears in places where uniformed soldiers couldn't go. Emily parked her truck between two polished Jeeps, the contrast stark and immediate. She stepped out, boots crunching on gravel, and shouldered a worn canvas backpack that had seen too many miles. Her olive drab t-shirt was faded but crisp, her cargo pants well worn but immaculate. Nothing about her screamed soldier, let alone officer. She looked like someone who might deliver mail to the base, not train within it. Across the yard, 40 men and women stood in formation, their uniforms pressed, their postures perfect. Emily walked toward them, unhurried, her gait steady and economical. Every eye turned to watch her approach, conversation dropping to whispers, then silence. "Who the hell is that?" Michael Carter muttered to the man beside him. Carter stood 6'2", with shoulders built from years of college football and a confidence honed in the officer ranks of the 82nd Airborne. His father had been a colonel, his grandfather a general. Military service ran in his blood like a covenant. Before anyone could answer, Captain Howard Marshall strode onto the parade ground, clipboard in hand. He was lean and hard, a Vietnam veteran with a perpetual scowl etched into his face. The formation snapped to attention. "At ease," Marshall barked, scanning the line. His eyes found Emily standing slightly apart from the group. "You, name and rank." "Emily Mercer, Captain," she replied, her voice calm and clear. Marshall checked his clipboard, frowning. "You're late, Mercer." "My truck broke down outside of Billings, sir. I fixed it as quickly as I could." A ripple of suppressed laughter moved through the formation. Fixed her own truck, like some grease monkey. Marshall's eyes narrowed. "This program doesn't tolerate excuses. Fall in." Emily took her place at the end of the line. She felt the stares but didn't acknowledge them. She'd faced worse, much worse. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marshall addressed the group pacing before them like a caged predator. "Welcome to hell. For the next 16 weeks, you will be pushed beyond your limits. You will be broken down and rebuilt. Half of you won't make it past the first month. Another quarter will wash out before graduation." He paused, his gaze sweeping across their faces. "This isn't about who you were before. Your family names, your connections, your previous assignments. None of that matters here. What matters is what you can do, what you can endure, and what you can become." His eyes lingered on Emily for a moment longer than the others. "Dismissed to barracks. Gear inspection at 0600 tomorrow. Don't be late." As the formation dispersed, Emily felt a shoulder brush roughly against hers. Michael Carter looked down at her, his mouth twisted in a smirk. "You sure you're in the right place, farm girl?" Emily met his gaze without expression. "Quite sure." He snorted and walked away, joined by a woman with sharp features and calculating eyes. Rebecca Wilson, her name tag read. She glanced back at Emily with undisguised contempt. "Gender quota," Wilson murmured, just loud enough for Emily to hear. "They'll let anyone in these days." Emily picked up her bag and headed toward the women's barracks, ignoring the whispers that followed here. The concrete building was Spartan, rows of metal bunks, industrial lockers, and communal showers that promised no privacy. She claimed a bottom bunk in the corner, the least desirable spot where the pipes clanked all night, and the draft was coldest. Wilson entered with two other women, claiming the bunks nearest the heater. She watched Emily methodically unpacking her meager belongings, 3 sets of fatigues worn but meticulously maintained, a small leather case containing a sewing kit and basic toiletries. A folded photograph she placed carefully in her breast pocket without looking at it. "Hey, thrift shop," Wilson called out. "Where'd you serve before this?" "The motor pool," Emily continued, arranging her gear, her movements precise and economical. "Force Recon Camp Lejeune. Before that, Fort Benning." Wilson's eyebrows rose slightly. Force Recon was no joke, the Marine Corps' elite reconnaissance unit. But Emily didn't look the part. No swagger, no visible muscle, nothing that said special operations. Wilson exchanged glances with her companions. "Right," she said, unconvinced. "And I'm the Queen of England." Emily didn't respond. She finished her preparations, lay back on her bunk, and closed her eyes, hands folded across her stomach. To anyone watching, she might have been asleep. But beneath her eyelids, her eyes were moving, scanning the room, mapping exits, cataloging details. Old habits. Morning came brutally early at Fort Morrison. The instructors believed in the Soviet threat, in the need for perfect soldiers to counter it. At Euro 4:30, the lights blazed on, and boots thundered through the hallways. By Euro 500, Emily was standing at attention beside her bunk uniform, crisp bed made with hospital corners tight enough to bounce a quarter. Captain Marshall moved through the barracks like a storm front, inspecting each area with surgical precision. When he reached Emily's bunk, he paused, searching for a flaw. Finding none, his frown deepened, as if her perfection was an insult rather than a virtue. "Adequate, Mercer," he said before moving on. At 05:30, the entire class assembled on the parade ground for physical training. The Montana morning was bitter cold frost silvering the grass. Steam rose from their bodies as they began. Jumping jacks, push-ups, sit-ups, and a 5-mile run that took them up the punishing hills surrounding the base. Emily kept pace easily. Her breathing measured her strides, economical. She didn't push to the front, didn't lag behind. She simply maintained her position in the middle of the pack, seemingly without effort. Carter noticed. Running beside her, he increased his pace, expecting her to fall behind. When she matched him effortlessly, his jaw tightened. "Not bad for a grease monkey," he said between breaths, voice dripping with condescension. Emily didn't respond, her eyes fixed on the path ahead. "What's wrong?" "Too winded to talk." Carter pressed his own breathing, becoming labored as they hit an incline. "Conserving energy," she replied simply, her voice steady. By mile 4, Carter was struggling. Emily maintained her pace, neither slowing nor accelerating. When they crested the final hill, Carter stumbled slightly. Without breaking stride, Emily's hand shot out, steadying him just enough to prevent a fall. Carter yanked his arm away as if burned. "I don't need your help," he hissed. Emily dropped her hand and continued running, face impassive. At breakfast in the mess hall, Emily sat alone, methodically consuming a tray of powdered eggs, toast, and black coffee. The room buzzed with conversation bonds already forming among the trainees. She felt Wilson's eyes on her from across the room, heard the whispers, the snickers. It didn't matter. She wasn't here to make friends. A shadow fell across her tray. She looked up to see Daniel Parker, another trainee, a former Army Ranger with a square jaw and calculating eyes. "This seat taken?" he asked, though he was already sitting down. Emily shook her head once returning to her food. "You're not what I expected," Parker said, studying her. "And what did you expect?" she asked, her voice neutral. Parker shrugged. "Someone who looks like they belong in an intelligence unit. You look like you should be fixing Jeeps somewhere." "Appearances can be deceiving." "So they say." Parker leaned closer. "Word is you were Force Recon." "That true?" Emily took a sip of her coffee, neither confirming nor denying. "Because I know guys in Force Recon," Parker continued. "Tough sons of bitches, every one of them. They don't make them small and quiet like you." Emily set down her mug. "Are you questioning my service record, Parker?" Something in her tone made him hesitate. For just a moment, her eyes met his, and what he saw there made him lean back involuntarily. "Just making conversation," he said, his smirk returning. "No offense meant. None taken." She finished her coffee and stood. "Excuse me." As she walked away, Parker called after her. "See you at the range, Mercer. Hope you can shoot better than you can socialize." The firing range at Fort Morrison was state-of-the-art, designed to simulate combat conditions rather than traditional marksmanship. The morning's exercise involved moving through a course with multiple target stations, engaging enemies, while distinguishing from civilians, all under simulated stress conditions, including smoke noise and instructors shouting contradictory commands. Each trainee was issued an M16A1, the standard service rifle that had seen America through the jungles of Vietnam. The weapon was a controversial choice. Many soldiers had reported jamming issues in muddy conditions, but it remained the backbone of the infantry. Its lightweight design and 5.56mm rounds made it manageable for extended operations, though at the cost of stopping power compared to the older M14. Emily checked her weapon methodically, bolt chamber magazine sights. Her hands moved with practiced precision, familiar with every curve and mechanism of the rifle. This particular M16 had seen better days. The stock was worn smooth, the barrel showed signs of heavy use, and the sights were slightly misaligned. Captain Marshall watched her inspection with narrowed eyes. "Problem with your weapon, Mercer?" "No, sir," she replied, not looking up. "Just getting acquainted." When her turn came to run the course, Emily moved with fluid efficiency. No wasted motion, no hesitation. She flowed from cover to cover, dropped to prone position when necessary, and engaged targets with mechanical precision. Her shots clustered tightly, two to the center mass of each hostile target and perfect trigger discipline on the civilian silhouettes. At the final station, a target pivoted unexpectedly from behind a barrier, a child holding a weapon. In the split second allowed for decision-making, Emily's shot struck the silhouette's arm, disabling without killing. When she emerged from the course, the rangemaster checked her score with evident surprise. 42 targets engaged, 42 hit, 0 civilian casualties, optimal ammunition conservation. Despite the misaligned sights, she had compensated perfectly. Carter ran the course next, his movements aggressive and showy. He hit 39 targets, but also struck 2 civilians. When he saw Emily's score posted on the board, his face darkened. "Beginner's luck," he muttered to Wilson, who had done nearly as well as Emily. Wilson's eyes narrowed. "Or she's not what she seems." The afternoon brought classroom instruction, intelligence gathering methodologies, threat assessment protocols, and the psychology of interrogation. The instructor, Major Lawrence Bennett, was a former CIA analyst with a hawkish view of Soviet intentions. "The Russians aren't just our military adversaries," he explained, pacing before a map showing Soviet spheres of influence. "They're engaged in an ideological war for the soul of humanity. Their agents are embedded in governments worldwide. Their influence operations are sophisticated and far-reaching." Emily sat near the back, taking minimal notes. Bennett noticed. "Mercer," he called suddenly, "you seem unimpressed by the Soviet threat. Perhaps you'd like to share your assessment of their capabilities in Eastern Europe." Without hesitation, Emily rose. "The Warsaw Pact nations represent a formidable conventional force, with approximately 201 divisions compared to NATO's 133. Their T-62 and T-72 tanks outnumber our M60s by nearly 3 to 1. However, their command structure suffers from rigid centralization, creating vulnerabilities that can be exploited through asymmetric operations." She paused, then continued, her voice steady and authoritative. "Their most significant advantage lies not in military hardware, but in human intelligence assets. The KGB and GRU have successfully penetrated multiple NATO security apparatuses. The defection of James Angleton's protege last year compromised at least 17 field operations in East Germany alone." The room had gone silent. Bennett stared at her, his expression unreadable. "That information about the Angleton case isn't in the course materials," he said slowly. "In fact, it's classified." Emily met his gaze. "Yes, sir." "See me after class, Mercer." When the session ended, Emily approached Bennett's desk. He was studying her file, his brow furrowed. "Your record is interesting," he said without looking up. "Extensive redactions, minimal personal information. Your previous commanding officer's assessments are either missing or classified above my clearance level." He closed the folder and finally met her eyes. "Who are you really, Captain Mercer?" "Just a soldier, sir." Bennett leaned back in his chair. "I've been teaching this course for 3 years. I know every major intelligence operation run in Eastern Europe since 1970. Yet I've never heard of you. That would suggest the system is working as designed, wouldn't it, sir?" A ghost of a smile crossed Bennett's face. "Watch yourself, Mercer. Carter and his crowd don't appreciate mysteries, and they don't fight fair." "Noted, sir." The following days fell into a grueling rhythm. Pre-dawn physical training, tactical exercises, classroom instruction, and evening study sessions that often stretched past midnight. The program was designed to identify weaknesses, to push boundaries until they broke. Each day, more trainees washed out unable to meet the punishing standards. Emily endured. She never excelled ostentatiously, never failed spectacularly. She simply persisted, her performance consistent and unremarkable, except in moments when true expertise couldn't be hidden. During a field exercise in land navigation, the trainees were dropped in wilderness terrain with minimal equipment in order to reach designated coordinates within 6 hours. A storm moved in, bringing driving rain and near-zero visibility. Several teams became disoriented, including Carter's. Emily navigated the treacherous conditions with uncanny precision, reaching the rally point 2 hours ahead of schedule. When Carter's team finally arrived soaked and miserable, he found her calmly waiting under an improvised shelter, a small fire burning despite the wet conditions. "How the hell did you manage that?" he demanded, gesturing to the fire. Emily shrugged. "Pine resin burns even when wet. Old trick." Carter's eyes narrowed. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Making us look bad?" "I'm just doing my job," she replied evenly. "Your job," he scoffed. "What exactly is your job?" "Mercer, nobody knows where you came from. Nobody knows how someone like you got into a program like this." Emily stoked the fire, her face illuminated by the dancing flames. "Perhaps you should focus less on me and more on your own performance, Carter. You missed the rally point by nearly a kilometer." His face flushed with anger. "This isn't over," he muttered, turning away. That night in the barracks, Emily felt the atmosphere shift. The other women were no longer simply dismissive. Now there was active hostility. Wilson sat on her bunk watching Emily with cold calculation. "You think you're special," Wilson said, her voice carrying in the quiet room. "But we've all seen your type before. Women who sleep their way to advancement." Emily continued preparing her gear for the next day's exercise, her movements unhurried. "Nothing to say," Wilson pressed. "No denial, no righteous indignation." "Would it change your mind if I did?" Emily asked without looking up. Wilson laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "My father fought in Korea. My brother died in Vietnam. I earned my place here through sacrifice and service. What did you sacrifice, Mercer? Besides your dignity?" Emily finally looked up, her eyes meeting Wilson's. For a brief moment, something flickered in their depths, a shadow of experiences too dark to name. Then it was gone, her expression once again impassive. "Good night, Wilson," she said quietly, turning away. Week 3 brought the dreaded SEER training, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. Normally reserved for special operations forces and pilots, this condensed version was designed to prepare intelligence officers for worst-case scenarios behind enemy lines. The trainees were transported to a remote training facility in the mountains, a mock prisoner of war camp, complete with guard towers, barbed wire, and instructors playing the role of hostile captors. They were processed in, stripped of personal items, issued prisoner uniforms, and subjected to disorientation techniques, including sleep deprivation and loud continuous noise. Emily moved through the intake procedures mechanically, her face betraying nothing as male guards conducted invasive searches and hurled verbal abuse. When one guard grabbed her roughly by the arm, she didn't resist, didn't flinch. Her eyes remained fixed on the middle distance, seeing something far beyond the present moment. The trainees were separated into isolation cells subjected to hours of interrogation. The instructors used psychological tactics rather than physical torture, though the lines sometimes blurred. Stress positions, temperature manipulation, and targeted psychological pressure were all part of the program. On the third day, Carter broke. After 36 hours without sleep, he gave up key information during a mock interrogation. When he was returned to the common area where the prisoners were periodically gathered, his face was ashen, his confidence shattered. Emily had been placed in a punishment cell for insubordination, refusing to reveal even basic biographical information to her interrogators. She was brought back to the common area on the fourth day, moving stiffly from hours spent in a stress position, but her eyes were clear and focused. Parker watched her with growing curiosity. "How are you still functioning?" he whispered when the guards weren't looking. "They've had you in the box for 20 hours. Emily took a small sip from the metallic-tasting water they had been provided. "Focus on your breathing. Compartmentalize the pain. Find a memory and live in it. Parker studied her face, really seeing her for the first time. Beneath the plain features and unassuming demeanor was something forged in fire, a strength that didn't come from physical size or institutional power. "Where did you learn to do that?" he asked. Before she could answer, the guards returned, separating them for another round of interrogations. The breaking point came during the final exercise, a simulated escape and evasion scenario. The trainees, now reduced to 20 from the original 40, were transported to a new facility. During the move, they were given an opportunity to escape and evade capture in the surrounding wilderness for 48 hours. They were divided into teams of 4. Emily found herself grouped with Carter, Wilson, and Parker, the 3 people in the program who had shown her the most hostility. It was no coincidence. The instructors deliberately created friction to test how teams performed under stress. "Great," Carter muttered when the assignments were announced. "We get the janitor." Emily ignored the jab, focusing instead on memorizing the terrain map they were shown briefly before the exercise began. When they were loaded into transport vehicles with bags over their heads, she was already formulating a plan. The escape opportunity came when the convoy stopped at a checkpoint. In the confusion of a staged argument between guards, the trainees were meant to slip away. Carter immediately took charge, leading their group toward the tree line at a reckless pace that left them exposed. "We need to move northeast," he insisted once they reached cover. "There's an extraction point marked on the map." "That's a trap," Emily said quietly. "It's too obvious." Carter rounded on her. "No one asked for your opinion." "She's right," Parker interjected. "It makes no sense to put an extraction point where they showed us on the map. They're testing whether we can think independently." Wilson looked between them, then at the darkening sky. "We need to make a decision. They'll have search parties out soon." "We go south," Emily said with quiet authority. "The terrain is more difficult, but it provides better cover. There's a river valley that will mask our heat signatures from infrared tracking." "Well, then how the hell would you know about infrared tracking?" Carter demanded. Emily met his gaze steadily. "Because that's what I would do if I were hunting escaped prisoners." Something in her tone silenced further argument. They moved south, Emily naturally taking point, leading them through dense underbrush and across rocky terrain that left minimal tracks. Night fell, bringing with it a bone-deep cold that made their teeth chatter. "We need shelter," Wilson said, hugging herself for warmth. Emily nodded. "There's a formation of rocks ahead that should provide cover from 3 sides. We can rest there until dawn." The makeshift shelter was cramped but defensible. Emily organized a watch rotation, taking the first shift herself. As the others tried to sleep, she sat at the entrance, eyes scanning the darkness, ears attuned to the forest sounds. Parker couldn't sleep. He watched Emily from where he lay, noting how she periodically checked sightlines, how her hand occasionally drifted to her ankle where in a real situation a weapon might be concealed. "You've done this before," he said softly, not wanting to wake the others. "For real, I mean." Emily didn't turn around. "Get some rest, Parker. Your watch is next." "That's not an answer." "No," she agreed, "it's not." Dawn brought new challenges. Aircraft sounds overhead indicated the search had intensified. Emily led them through a stream to mask their scent from tracking dogs, then through a series of ravines that kept them hidden from aerial observation. By midday, exhaustion and hunger were taking their toll. Carter's earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by simmering resentment. When Emily suggested they split up temporarily to confuse pursuers, he saw an opportunity. "Fine," he said. "Wilson and I will circle west. You and Parker go east. We'll rendezvous at the lightning-struck pine we passed an hour ago." Emily nodded, though something in Carter's manner put her on alert. She and Parker headed east, moving carefully through increasingly rocky terrain. "He's planning something," Parker said once they were alone. "He's had it in for you since day one." "I know," Emily replied. "But right now, surviving this exercise is more important than Carter's ego." They continued in silence for several minutes before Parker spoke again. "Why does he hate you so much? What did you do to him?" Emily paused, considering how to answer. "I represent something he doesn't understand. People fear what they don't understand." "And what's that?" "Someone who succeeds without needing to prove themselves at every turn." The ambush came as they were navigating a narrow pass between 2 rock formations. Carter and Wilson had doubled back, positioning themselves on higher ground. As Emily and Parker entered the pass, Carter shoved a boulder down the slope. Emily heard it before she saw it, the subtle scrape of stone against stone. She reacted instinctively, shoving Parker clear of the path. The boulder crashed down, missing them both, but sending a shower of smaller rocks cascading around them. Emily lost her footing, tumbling several feet down a steep incline before catching herself against a tree. Her shirt tore, exposing her back as she struggled to regain her balance. Parker scrambled down to help her, then froze, his eyes fixed on what the torn fabric had revealed. Across her left shoulder blade was a tattoo, a black panther in mid-leap poised above a shattered compass. The design was stark against her skin, the detail extraordinary. "Holy shit," Parker whispered. "You're one of them." Emily pulled the fabric, closed her eyes suddenly hard. "Help me up." Above them, Carter and Wilson appeared at the edge of the incline, their expressions shifting from triumph to confusion at seeing both Emily and Parker alive. "It was an accident," Carter called down, his voice unconvincing. "Rock must have come loose." Parker ignored him, still staring at Emily. "Phantom Echo," he said, the name barely audible. "My uncle told me stories. Said they were ghosts, that they didn't exist in any official capacity." "Your uncle talks too much," Emily replied tersely, getting to her feet. Before Parker could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. "That's enough." All four trainees turned to see Colonel Frank Reynolds, standing at the top of the ridge, his weathered face set in grim lines. Reynolds was the commanding officer of Fort Morrison, a legendary figure in military intelligence circles who rarely interacted directly with trainees. His eyes were fixed on Emily, specifically on the torn section of her shirt that partially revealed the tattoo. His expression changed from anger to shock, then to something approaching reverence. "Captain Mercer," he said, his voice different now. "My apologies for the interruption." Emily straightened, meeting his gaze. "No apology necessary, Colonel." Reynolds turned to Carter and Wilson, his previous deference replaced by cold fury. "You two, report to Captain Marshall immediately. This exercise is over." As Carter and Wilson retreated, visibly confused by the Colonel's reaction, Reynolds approached Emily. He stopped a respectful distance away, then did something that left Parker speechless. He saluted her, a gesture of profound respect from a superior officer to a subordinate. "It's an honor," Reynolds said quietly. "Shadow spoke highly of you." Emily returned the salute, her posture shifting subtly. For the first time since arriving at Fort Morrison, she stood with her full presence revealed. No longer the unassuming figure blending into the background, but a soldier of extraordinary capability and experience. "The honor is mine, Colonel," she replied. "He spoke highly of you as well." Reynolds nodded, then turned to Parker, who was watching the exchange with undisguised confusion. "Lieutenant Parker, what you've witnessed today is classified. Do you understand?" Parker swallowed hard, nodding. "Yes, sir." "Good." Reynolds gestured towards a path leading back to the base. "Shall we, Captain Mercer? I believe we have matters to discuss." As they walked, Parker fell in step beside Emily, his voice low. "Who are you really?" Emily glanced at him, then at the Montana mountains surrounding them. For a moment, her eyes seemed to look beyond the present, to places and times Parker couldn't imagine. "Someone who learned the hard way that appearances are the best camouflage," she finally answered, "and that the quietest warriors are often the most effective." Ahead of them, the training facility came into view, its buildings stark against the landscape. And standing at the main gate, his posture unmistakable even at a distance, was a man whose presence changed the very air around him. Tall, broad-shouldered, with silver hair cut military short, he wore the stars of a general on his uniform. Emily's steps faltered for just a moment before she continued forward, her face once again an unreadable mask. "That's General Robert Mercer," Parker said, his voice tinged with awe. "Deputy Commander of Special Operations Command. What's he doing here?" Emily didn't answer, but as they drew closer, the general's eyes found hers across the distance, and something passed between them. A silent communication born of shared experiences and deeper connections. "He's waiting for you," Reynolds said quietly. "Yes," Emily replied. "He always does." The debriefing room at Fort Morrison was a windowless concrete box designed to contain secrets. Emily sat across from Colonel Reynolds, a steel table between them, the harsh fluorescent light casting shadows across their faces. General Robert Mercer stood by the door, his presence filling the small space with quiet authority. "Phantom Echo," Reynolds said, breaking the silence. "I thought the unit was deactivated after Saigon fell." Emily's face remained impassive. Officially it was. And unofficially, Reynolds pressed. Colonel General Mercer interjected, his deep voice resonating in the confined space. Some questions are better left unasked. Reynolds nodded, understanding the boundaries. He slid a folder across the table to Emily. Her personnel file, the cover stamped with classification markings that exceeded his own security clearance. Your actual service record, he said. The unredacted version arrived this morning, hand-delivered by the general himself. Emily didn't touch the folder. Then you know why I'm here. I know that you're not just another trainee. Reynolds leaned forward, his weathered face etched with a mix of respect and concern. What I don't understand is why someone with your qualifications would submit to this program at all, let alone tolerate the treatment you've received. Emily's eyes met the general's for a brief moment before returning to Reynolds. Assessment and recruitment. Understanding dawned on Reynolds' face. You're evaluating my people. Some of them, she confirmed. Intelligence suggests Soviet counterintelligence has been placing sleeper agents in military training programs. We needed to observe from within. Reynolds absorbed this, his expression darkening. And have you found what you're looking for? Not yet, Emily replied, but we're getting closer. The colonel glanced at General Mercer, who gave a barely perceptible nod. Whatever resources you need, Captain Mercer, they're yours. But there's the matter of Carter and Wilson. Their actions today were exactly what we needed, Emily interrupted. Pressure reveals character. Let them think they've won a small victory. It will make them careless. Reynolds nodded slowly. As you wish. He stood gathering the file. There's one more thing. Your tattoo. The Black Panther is known only to a handful of people with the highest clearances. If Parker speaks about what he saw, he won't, Emily said with quiet certainty. After Reynolds left the room, fell into silence. Emily finally looked fully at General Mercer, her professional mask softening almost imperceptibly. Robert, she said, her voice lower now, more intimate. Emily. He moved to the chair Reynolds had vacated, his movements precise despite his imposing frame. Up close, the lines around his eyes were deeper than when she'd last seen him. You're taking an unnecessary risks. We've had this conversation before, and we'll keep having it until you stop being so damn stubborn. Despite his words, there was no real anger in his voice, only concern wrapped in years of shared history. Emily's lips curved in the barest suggestion of a smile. It's why you married me. The tension in Mercer's shoulders eased slightly. He reached across the table, his large hand covering hers. His thumb brushed over the simple gold band on her finger, the only personal item she hadn't stored away upon arrival. James made contact, he said, shifting to business. 2 days ago. Emily's expression changed, a flicker of something unreadable passing across her features. Where? Berlin, East Side. Mercer's jaw tightened. He crossed through checkpoint Charlie using credentials that shouldn't exist anymore. Left a message at the dead drop on Frankfurter Allee. What did it say? She wasn't the last, that's all. Emily withdrew her hand, her posture straightening. He's talking about Natalia Orlova, the defector from the Leningrad Residentura. Mercer nodded. The one who claimed there were multiple moles in our intelligence apparatus. The one who was found with her throat cut 3 days after debriefing. James trained her, Emily said quietly, before he disappeared. Phantom Echo always operated outside normal chains of command. Mercer said, his tone careful. Even I never had full visibility into your operations. But whatever Shadow is doing now, he's doing it without authorization. Emily stood pacing the small room with controlled energy. He wouldn't break protocol without reason. If he's surfaced now after 3 years of silence, it means something critical has changed. Or he's compromised, Mercer countered. The Soviets would love nothing more than to capture the legendary Shadow Blackwood. To turn him. Emily stopped, fixing him with a hard stare. He would die before turning. Everyone breaks eventually, Emily, even the best. Not him. Her voice held absolute conviction. And not me. Mercer sighed, running a hand over his face. That's what I'm afraid of. The tension between them was broken by a sharp knock at the door. Captain Marshall entered without waiting for a response, his face tight with barely contained anger. Sir, he addressed Mercer, deliberately ignoring Emily. Carter and Wilson are claiming Mercer sabotaged the exercise. They're demanding a formal review. Mercer's expression hardened. Are they indeed, and who exactly do they think they are to demand anything? Marshall shifted uncomfortably. Carter's father sits on the Armed Services Committee, sir. He's already made a call to the base commander. Of course he has. Mercer stood straightening to his full imposing height. Captain Marshall, effective immediately, Captain Mercer is no longer a trainee in your program. She is now a special advisor with full operational authority, answerable only to myself and Colonel Reynolds. Marshall blinked confusion and surprise washing on his face. Sir, you heard me, Captain. Captain Mercer's cover is officially blown, which means we pivot to the next phase of the operation. He turned to Emily. I assume this works with your assessment parameters. Emily nodded once. It does, sir. Good. Mercer faced Marshall again. Assemble the remaining trainees in the lecture hall in 1 hour. And Captain, not a word about this conversation to anyone. Clear. Crystal clear, sir. After Marshall left, Emily looked at her husband with a raised eyebrow. Special advisor. Would you prefer avenging angel, because that's the look you're giving me right now? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Besides, it's not entirely a cover. Your expertise will be genuinely valuable to these trainees, those who aren't Soviet plants anyway. And the others, his smile faded, find them, Emily, before they find us. The lecture hall buzzed with speculation. The abrupt cancellation of the SEER exercise, the appearance of a 2-star general on base, and the rumors about what had happened in the mountains, it all fueled a wildfire of theories among the trainees. Parker sat apart from the others, his mind still processing what he'd witnessed. The tattoo on Emily's back wasn't just any design. His uncle, a former Night Stalker pilot who transported special operations teams during Vietnam, had told him whispered stories about an elite unit that operated so far in the shadows that most of the military didn't know they existed. Phantom Echo, they called themselves, named for their ability to appear and disappear like ghosts, leaving nothing but whispers in their wake. His uncle had transported them once, a team of 6 operators who boarded his helicopter without insignia. Their faces obscured their weapons, unlike anything he'd seen before. The only identifying mark, a Black Panther tattoo over a shattered compass. You look like you've seen a ghost, Wilson said, sliding into the seat beside him. Her usual confidence seemed diminished, her eyes darting nervously around the room. Maybe I have, Parker replied vaguely. What happened out there? After we left, Wilson pressed. Did Mercer say anything? Parker studied her with new wariness. Why was she so interested? Nothing important, just standard reprimand stuff. Before Wilson could respond, the side door opened and Colonel Reynolds entered, followed by Captain Marshall. The room immediately fell silent. Reynolds took position at the podium, his posture rigid. Trainees, he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. There has been a change in the program structure. For the remainder of your training, you will have the benefit of a special advisor with unique field experience. The main doors at the back of the hall opened and every head turned. General Mercer entered first, his uniform immaculate, his presence commanding immediate respect. Behind him came Emily, but not the Emily they had known for the past 3 weeks. Gone was the plain, unremarkable woman in faded fatigues. In her place stood a soldier whose very bearing radiated quiet authority. She wore standard officer service uniform, but on her chest were rows of ribbons and decorations that told a story of extraordinary service, including several that Parker didn't recognize. Her hair was still pulled back, but the severe style now seemed less about blending in and more about practicality. As she walked down the center aisle, her eyes swept across the assembled trainees, missing nothing. When her gaze passed over Parker, he felt a chill run down his spine, not from fear, but from the sudden realization that he'd been in the presence of something rare and dangerous without knowing it. Carter, seated in the front row, stiffened visibly. His face flushed red as Emily passed him without acknowledgement, taking her place beside Reynolds at the podium. Many of you, Reynolds continued, have questioned Captain Mercer's qualifications and presence in this program. Those questions end today. Captain Mercer has more field experience than most of you will accumulate in your entire careers. She has operated behind enemy lines in conditions that would break most soldiers. And for the next 7 weeks, she will be evaluating your performance, your character, and your potential for special operations assignments. A murmur ran through the room. Special operations assignments were coveted positions. pathways to accelerated promotion, and prestigious roles within the intelligence community. Reynolds stepped aside, yielding the podium to Emily. She surveyed the room for a long moment before speaking, her voice calm, but carrying an unmistakable note of authority. Intelligence work isn't about who's the strongest, the fastest, or the most politically connected, she began. It's about who can think clearly when everything falls apart. It's about who can maintain their cover when every instinct screams for them to run. It's about who can be trusted with secrets that could start or end wars. She paused, letting her words settle over the silent room. In the field, your fancy degrees and family connections won't save you. Your ability to adapt, to think creatively, and to maintain absolute loyalty to your mission and your country, that's what will keep you alive. Her eyes found Carter, then Wilson. Some of you have already demonstrated that you prioritize personal advancement over mission integrity. That ends now. Carter's jaw tightened visibly, but he remained silent. Starting tomorrow, Emily continued, you will undergo a specialized training regimen focused on covert operations, counterintelligence, and deep cover protocols. Those who cannot meet the standard will be reassigned. Those who can will be considered for roles you previously didn't know existed. She stepped back, yielding the podium to General Mercer. As he began outlining administrative changes to the program, Wilson leaned close to Parker. What the hell is going on? She whispered. Who is she really? Parker shook his head slightly, unwilling to share what he knew, or thought he knew. Something about Wilson's intensity put him on edge. Her interest seemed more than professional curiosity. After the briefing, the trainees were dismissed to the barracks with orders to prepare for an early start the next day. As they filed out, Parker noticed Emily speaking quietly with General Mercer in a corner, their heads bent close together. Though they maintained professional distance, there was an intimacy to their conversation that suggested a deeper connection. Carter noticed too. Sleeping her way to the top after all, he muttered, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. Should have guessed. Parker felt a surge of disgust. You don't know what you're talking about, Carter. Don't I? Carter's eyes narrowed. First day she's exposed, and suddenly she's best friends with a two-star general. Come on, even you're not that naive. Before Parker could respond, a hand clamped down on Carter's shoulder. Captain Marshall stood there, his expression thunderous. Lieutenant Carter, he said, his voice dangerously low. A word outside. Now. As Marshall led Carter away, Parker glanced back toward Emily and Mercer. They were watching the exchange, their expressions unreadable. For a brief moment, Emily's eyes met Parker's. There was something in them. A warning, perhaps, or an evaluation. Then she turned away, continuing her conversation as if nothing had happened. That night, the women's barracks was thick with tension. Emily's bunk remained empty. She had been reassigned to officers' quarters, but her presence lingered like a ghost. Wilson paced between the bunks, her usual composure fractured. It doesn't make sense, she kept saying. 3 weeks of playing the nobody, and suddenly she's running the program. What's her angle? One of the other women, a quiet intelligence analyst named Diane Harper, looked up from her book. Maybe she was evaluating us all along, testing how we'd react to someone who didn't fit the mold. Wilson shot her a venomous look. That's ridiculous. This is a training program, not some elaborate psychological experiment. Isn't it, though? Harper closed her book. Think about it. We're being trained to operate in environments where we'll be judged, underestimated, maybe even targeted. If you can't handle a colleague who seems less qualified than you, how will you handle actual adversaries? Wilson stopped pacing, her eyes narrowing. Whose side are you on, Harper? Side. Harper raised an eyebrow. I wasn't aware we were taking sides. I thought we were all here to serve our country. Wilson stared at her for a long moment, then resumed her pacing, muttering under her breath. In the officers' quarters, Emily sat at a small desk reviewing files on each of the remaining trainees. The room was Spartan, a single bed, a desk, a chair, and a small closet. But compared to the barracks, it was private luxury. A soft knock at the door interrupted her work. She closed the file she was reading before responding. Enter. The door opened to reveal General Mercer. He had changed from his formal uniform to more casual attire. Khaki pants and a button-down shirt that did little to diminish his commanding presence. He carried 2 mugs of coffee, offering one to Emily as he entered. Old habits, he said with a small smile. You still take it black. Some things don't change. She accepted the mug, their fingers brushing briefly. Any fallout from Carter's father? Mercer sat on the edge of the bed, his large frame making the standard issue furniture seem small. Senator Carter made his obligatory noise. I reminded him that his son almost killed a fellow officer during a training exercise. He backed down quickly enough. Emily nodded, taking a sip of coffee. Carter's not our primary concern anyway. He's too obvious, too entitled to be effective intelligence material, let alone a Soviet asset. Wilson, then, she's the most likely candidate. Her background checks out too perfectly, and she's been unusually interested in my true role here. Mercer considered this. We could pull her now, interrogate her properly. Emily shook her head. Not yet. If she is the mole, we need to know who she reports to, what information she's passed, and whether there are others. Removing her too soon could compromise the entire operation. And if she makes you before we're ready, Emily's lips curved in a cold smile that didn't reach her eyes. She won't be the first to try. Mercer studied his wife's face, seeing beyond the professional mask to the weight she carried. James trained you well, he said softly. Sometimes I think too well. He taught me to survive. Her voice held an edge of defensiveness. At what cost, Emily? Mercer set his mug down, leaning forward. You've been operating in deep cover for most of your adult life. Always watching, always calculating, never fully present, even when you're not on mission. Emily's expression hardened. We both made our choices, Robert. This isn't the time to question them. Mercer sighed, running a hand through his silver hair. No, I suppose it isn't. He stood, moving toward the door. Just be careful. Whatever James is involved in, whatever he's trying to tell us, it's big enough that he's risking everything to surface after 3 years. I know. Emily's voice softened slightly. I'll find the mole, Robert, and then we'll find James. After Mercer left, Emily returned to the files, but her concentration was broken. Her hand drifted to the inner pocket of her uniform jacket, withdrawing a worn photograph. It showed a younger Emily standing beside a tall, powerfully built man with steel gray eyes and a face that seemed carved from granite. James Shadow Blackwood, the most legendary operative Phantom Echo had ever produced, and the man who had shaped Emily from a raw recruit into a weapon of precision and patience. The photo had been taken in Vietnam, 1971, shortly before the mission that would change everything. They stood before a half-collapsed temple jungle, stretching endlessly behind them. Emily looked impossibly young, barely 20, her eyes already holding the wariness of someone who had seen too much. Blackwood stood with his customary stillness, a quality Emily had worked for years to emulate. The ability to be so still that others forgot you were there. Emily traced the outline of his face with her finger, remembering. Vietnam, 1971. The jungle pressed in from all sides, humid and alive with sounds. Emily crouched in the undergrowth, her breathing slow and controlled despite the oppressive heat. Sweat trickled down her spine, but she didn't move to wipe it away. Stillness was survival. 20 meters ahead, a North Vietnamese patrol moved along the narrow trail, their voices low, rifles held ready. 6 men, all experienced, all alert to the dangers that surrounded them. They passed within arm's reach of where Shadow Blackwood concealed himself, yet none detected his presence. Emily counted heartbeats, waiting for the patrol to pass her position. When the last soldier disappeared around a bend, she remained motionless, listening for stragglers or signs that they doubled back. They're gone. Blackwood's voice came from directly behind her, though she hadn't heard him approach. But you moved your eyes too much. In different light, the reflection could have given you away. Emily turned to face her mentor, careful to keep her movements minimal. I needed to count them. Count with your ears, Blackwood instructed. Each man has a distinct footfall, a unique rhythm to his breathing. Learn to hear the difference. He moved past her, his large frame somehow navigating the dense vegetation without disturbing a single leaf. Emily followed, mirroring his movements, placing her feet exactly where his had been. They traveled in silence for hours, working their way deeper into territory controlled by the North Vietnamese army. Their mission was straightforward, but nearly impossible: locate and extract a high-value intelligence asset who had been compromised, a South Vietnamese officer who had been feeding information to the Americans for years. As dusk approached, they reached a small clearing dominated by the ruins of an ancient temple. Stone faces peered from crumbling walls, watching with empty eyes as the 2 Americans scouted the perimeter. We'll rest here, Blackwood decided. 2 hours, then we moved to the extraction point. Emily nodded, already checking sight lines and establishing defensive positions. They worked in practice harmony, securing the area without verbal communication. When they finally settled into a concealed alcove within the ruins, Emily allowed herself a small sip of water from her canteen. "You've improved," Blackwood said, his voice barely audible over the jungle sounds. "6 months ago, you would have been detected by that patrol." Coming from Shadow, this was high praise indeed. Emily accepted it with a nod, knowing better than to show pride. Pride led to complacency, and complacency led to death in their line of work. "The asset," she said instead. "Do you think he's still alive?" Blackwood's eyes, almost colorless in the fading light, assessed her. "You're asking the wrong question." "Which is the right one?" "Whether he's been turned." Blackwood's expression was grim. "A dead asset is a clean problem. A compromised one is a cancer that spreads." Emily absorbed this, understanding the implication. If their intelligence asset had been turned by the enemy, their extraction mission might become something else entirely. "How will we know?" she asked. "Watch his eyes," Blackwood replied. "Not what he says, not what he does. The eyes always tell the truth, even when the mind and body lie." They lapsed into silence again, each lost in their own thoughts as darkness claimed the jungle. When Blackwood spoke again, his question caught Emily off guard. "Why did you volunteer for Phantom Echo Mercer, the truth this time?" Emily hesitated. She had given the standard answers during her recruitment: duty, patriotism, desire to make a difference. All true, but not the whole truth. "I wanted to disappear," she finally said, knowing Blackwood would accept nothing less than honesty, to become someone else, someone stronger. Blackwood studied her face in the darkness. Running from something or towards something, both. Emily met his gaze steadily. "My father was a career diplomat. Old money, old connections. My entire life was mapped out before I was born. The right schools, the right husband, the right kind of invisibility. Women in my world weren't supposed to have opinions or ambitions beyond supporting their husbands' careers." "So you traded one kind of invisibility for another," Blackwood observed. Emily considered this. "The difference is choice. Here, invisibility is a skill I choose to cultivate, not a condition imposed on me." Blackwood nodded slowly. "A valid distinction." He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small object that gleamed dully in the faint moonlight filtering through the canopy. A compass, its glass face shattered its needle, still pointing unerringly north despite the damage. "My father gave me this before I shipped out to Korea," he said, turning the broken instrument in his calloused hands. "Said as long as I had it, I'd never lose my way." A rare, bitter smile crossed his face. "First firefight, I was in, a Chinese bullet hit it. Should have killed me, but the compass took the impact. Glass shattered, but the needle kept working." He offered it to Emily. She took it carefully, feeling the weight of both the object and the gesture. "Broken things still function," Blackwood said quietly. "Sometimes better than before because they've been tested. Remember that when you think you have reached your limit." Emily closed her fingers around the compass, understanding that she was being given more than a damaged navigational tool. This was Blackwood's way of saying he saw her potential, her value beyond her current capabilities. "Thank you," she said simply. Blackwood nodded once, then checked his watch. "Time to move." "The asset will be at the extraction point in 1 hour, assuming he's still alive." As they prepared to leave the sanctuary of the ruins, Blackwood paused, looking back at the temple with its ancient, weathered faces. "When this war is over, find something to hold on to, Mercer. Something real. This life, it takes more than it gives." Emily, young and still believing in her own invincibility, didn't fully understand his warning then. It would be years before his words resonated with the weight of lived experience. They slipped back into the jungle, two shadows moving through a hostile world carrying secrets that could change the course of a war neither of them fully believed in anymore. Emily tucked the photograph away, the memory fading like mist. The broken compass now formed part of her tattoo, a permanent reminder of the lesson Blackwood had taught her about strength emerging from damage. She returned her attention to the files, focusing specifically on Rebecca Wilson's background. On paper, Wilson was the perfect candidate for intelligence work. Daughter of a decorated Korean War veteran, sister killed in Vietnam, excellent academic record, impeccable psychological evaluations. Perhaps too perfect. Emily pulled a small notebook from her desk drawer, flipping to entries she'd made during her weeks of observation. Small inconsistencies in Wilson's behavior. Moments when her reactions seemed rehearsed rather than natural patterns in her questioning that suggested specific intelligence gathering rather than general curiosity. None of it was definitive, but together the observations painted a picture of someone playing a role. The question was whether that role was simply an ambitious officer trying to advance her career or something more sinister. Emily closed the notebook, her decision made. Tomorrow she would begin applying pressure. Not the obvious, brutal kind that Carter had attempted, but the subtle, psychological pressure that revealed cracks in even the best constructed facades. The kind of pressure Shadow Blackwood had taught her to apply with surgical precision. Morning arrived with military abruptness. No gentle dawn transition, just the harsh blare of a bugle at 0500 hours. The trainees assembled on the parade ground, sleep still clouding their eyes, bodies stiff from the previous day's interrupted exercise. Emily stood before them ramrod straight despite the early hour. She wore combat fatigues now practical and functional, but the authority she had revealed the previous day remained unmistakable in her bearing. Today, she announced without preamble, we begin specialized training in counterintelligence operations. This is not theoretical knowledge for future application. This is practical preparation for threats you will face immediately upon leaving this program. She paced slowly before the formation, her voice carrying clearly in the crisp morning air. The Cold War isn't just fought with nuclear missiles and proxy conflicts. It's fought in whispers, in coded messages, in seemingly innocent conversations. The person sitting next to you at dinner might be recording your words. The friendly attaché at an embassy reception might be cataloging your weaknesses. Emily stopped directly in front of Wilson, her gaze boring into the other woman. The greatest threat to American security isn't a Soviet missile. It's an American with access to classified information who has been compromised, coerced, or converted to the enemy's cause. Wilson met her gaze steadily, her expression revealing nothing. But Emily, trained to notice the minutest tells, saw the almost imperceptible tightening around her eyes, a flicker of tension that most would miss entirely. For the next week, Emily continued addressing the entire group again. You will be engaged in a continuous counterintelligence exercise. Each of you will be assigned a cover identity to maintain. Each of you will be given objectives to complete without breaking that cover. And each of you will be tasked with identifying others who may be operating under false pretenses. She gestured to Captain and Marshall, who began distributing sealed envelopes to each trainee. Your cover identities and initial objectives are in these packets. Memorize them, then destroy them. From this moment until the conclusion of the exercise, you are no longer military personnel. You are civilians with specific backgrounds and motivations gathering for a conference on international trade relations. Carter tore open his envelope with barely concealed contempt. This is childish, he muttered to those nearby. Playing make-believe won't prepare us for real intelligence work. Emily overheard as she was meant to. Lieutenant Carter, she said, her voice cutting through the murmurs, perhaps you'd care to share your expertise on real intelligence work with the class. Your extensive field experience must provide valuable insights. Carter flushed, caught between his desire to challenge her and the knowledge that he was outranked. No, ma'am, he said stiffly. Then I suggest you apply yourself to the exercise with the same dedication you've shown to undermining your fellow trainees. Emily's voice remained calm but carried an edge sharp enough to draw blood. Because unlike your previous actions, this exercise will actually determine your future in this program. Carter's jaw clenched, but he remained silent, his eyes burning with resentment. Emily turned her attention back to the group. The exercise begins at 0800 hours. The base's officers' club has been converted into a conference venue. You will arrive in civilian attire appropriate to your cover identities. You will interact naturally, pursue your objectives, and maintain vigilant awareness of potential security threats. She paused, making eye contact with several trainees, including Parker. Remember, in the field, breaking cover means death. Here it merely means the end of your intelligence career. Choose accordingly. As the trainees dispersed to prepare, Emily noticed Wilson lingering, studying her envelope with unusual intensity. When Wilson felt Emily's gaze on her, she looked up, a carefully constructed smile on her face. Quite the change from our previous training approach, Captain. Wilson said, her tone conversational but probing. I'm curious, was this always part of the program, or is this your special contribution? Emily gave nothing away in her expression. Elements of counterintelligence training have always been included. The methodology is mine. Based on your field experience, I assume, Wilson pressed. I'd be fascinated to hear more about your operational history sometime. There's so much we could learn from someone with your unique perspective. Emily allowed herself a small, cold smile. Perhaps you'll have that opportunity, Lieutenant Wilson, if you perform well enough in this exercise. Wilson's own smile remained fixed, but Emily caught the calculation behind her eyes, the slight narrowing that suggested she was reassessing her approach. I look forward to the challenge, Captain. Wilson tucked her envelope into her pocket and walked away. Her posture relaxed, but her movements too deliberate to be natural. Emily watched her go, mentally noting every detail of their interaction. The first move in their chess match had been made. Now she would wait to see how Wilson responded to the pressure of maintaining a cover identity while pursuing whatever actual agenda she might have. Parker approached as Wilson departed, his expression troubled. Captain Mercer, he began, his voice low. I feel like I should apologize for not standing up to Carter and the others earlier. I knew what they were doing wasn't right, but I didn't. Emily cut him off with a slight shake of her head. Save your apologies, Lieutenant. In our line of work, actions matter far more than intentions or regrets. Parker nodded, accepting the rebuke. Yes, ma'am. He hesitated, then pressed on. About what I saw in the mountains, the tattoo. I want you to know I haven't said anything to anyone. I know, Emily replied. If you had, we wouldn't be having this conversation. The implication hung in the air between them. Parker swallowed hard, understanding perfectly what she meant. I'll see you at the exercise, Lieutenant, Emily said, effectively dismissing him. As Parker walked away, General Mercer approached from the direction of the headquarters building. He waited until they were alone before speaking. Message from Berlin, he said without preamble. James made another appearance, this time at the American consulate. He requested extraction for an asset. High priority. Emily's expression sharpened. Did he make contact directly? No, used an intermediary. One of his old assets from Vietnam. Vietnamese woman relocated to Germany after the fall of Saigon. She delivered a package containing microfilm and a message. What did it say? Echo still active. 3 birds in the nest. Then coordinates for a meeting 2 weeks from now in Vienna. Emily absorbed this, her mind working through the implications. Echo still active meant phantom. Echo had never truly been shut down despite official records. 3 birds in the nest was their old code for multiple hostiles in close proximity. He's warning us that there are 3 Soviet assets within Fort Morrison, she concluded. Not just one. Mercer nodded grimly. That's my reading as well. The question is, who are they, and what information have they already compromised? Emily's gaze drifted to the departing trainees, her eyes lingering on Wilson's retreating figure. I'll find out, she promised, whatever it takes. The officers' club had been transformed into a convincing facsimile of a conference venue. Tables arranged in a horseshoe pattern, name placards for each delegate, a podium for presentations, and a sidebar with refreshments. It was exactly the kind of setting where intelligence operatives did some of their most productive work. Semi-formal gatherings, where alcohol loosened tongues and shared professional interests, provided natural openings for information exchange. The trainees arrived in their civilian personas, most looking uncomfortable in business attire after weeks in uniform. They moved awkwardly at first, adjusting to their cover identities and objectives, but gradually the room filled with conversation as they settled into their roles. Emily, dressed in a conservative navy blue skirt suit that deliberately understated her physicality, observed from a corner position that gave her sightlines to the entire room. She had assigned herself the role of conference organizer, a position that allowed her to interact with everyone while maintaining a natural distance. Carter had been assigned the identity of a French trade representative with connections to North African oil interests. He played the role with surprising commitment, his natural arrogance translating well to the haughty diplomat he was portraying. His French accent, however, was atrocious. Wilson moved through the room with graceful ease, embodying her cover as a British economic advisor with apparent effortlessness. She networked efficiently, engaging multiple delegates in conversations that artfully extracted information while revealing little. Of all the trainees, she showed the most natural aptitude for the exercise. Parker Cast, as a Norwegian shipping magnate, struggled more visibly with his role. His attempts at a Scandinavian accent were inconsistent, and his body language betrayed his military background, despite his civilian clothes. Emily made notes on a clipboard as she observed, documenting both strengths and weaknesses in each trainee's performance. But her primary focus remained on Wilson, watching for patterns or anomalies that might confirm her suspicions. The opportunity came during a scheduled presentation on international shipping regulations. As the designated presenter droned on about maritime boundaries, Emily noticed Wilson slip a folded piece of paper to a male trainee named Richards, who was playing the role of a Japanese trade official. The exchange was subtle, professional handlers passing information during a formal handshake, but Emily caught it. Richards pocketed the note without reading it, continuing his conversation with another trainee as if nothing had occurred. 10 minutes later, he excused himself to use the restroom. Emily gave him a 30-second head start, then followed. The men's room was at the end of a short hallway. Emily positioned herself around the corner, out of sight but within earshot. She heard the rustle of paper, then silence. When Richards emerged, his expression had changed subtly. A new tension around his mouth, a focused look in his eyes. Instead of returning to the main conference room, he turned in the opposite direction toward a side exit that led to the base's administrative buildings. Emily followed at a distance, maintaining visual contact without revealing her presence, a skill Shadow had drilled into her through countless exercises in urban environments around the world. Richards moved with purpose, checking his watch twice as he approached the communications building. He nodded to the guard at the entrance, showing his military ID before entering. Emily couldn't follow without drawing attention, so she circled around to a vantage point that gave her a view of both the front and rear exits. 15 minutes later, Richards emerged from the back door, glancing around furtively before heading toward the barracks. Emily made a mental note of the time and his behavior, adding another piece to the puzzle she was assembling. When she returned to the conference exercise, Wilson was deep in conversation with Carter, their heads bent close together despite their supposed roles representing different countries. Emily moved within earshot, pretending to rearrange materials on the sidebar. "Doesn't make sense," Carter was saying, his voice low. "Why would she suddenly reveal herself now? There must be something bigger happening." "Or someone forced her hand," Wilson replied. "The question is, what does she know about us?" Carter started to respond, but caught sight of Emily nearby. He straightened abruptly, switching to his terrible French accent. "The shipping regulations, they are most restrictive for our North African partners, non." Wilson recovered more smoothly, seamlessly transitioning to her British persona. "Indeed, Mr. Beaumont. Perhaps we should schedule a separate discussion to address these specific concerns." Emily approached them directly, clipboard in hand. "I couldn't help overhearing your interest in North African shipping regulations. As it happens, we have a special session on that very topic scheduled for tomorrow. I'd be happy to add both your names to the attendee list." Carter's smile was stiff. "That would be most helpful." "Wonderful." Emily made a show of writing on her clipboard. "Oh, and Ms. Harrington," she addressed Wilson using her cover name, "I noticed you missed the morning session on Soviet trade embargoes. Given your expertise in Eastern European economics, that seemed unusual." Wilson didn't flinch. "A migraine, I'm afraid. Dreadful timing. I've reviewed the materials, however." Emily nodded sympathetically. "Of course, these conferences can be quite taxing. I find it helps to maintain regular routines. Meals at the same time, adequate hydration, regular exercise." She smiled pleasantly. "Speaking of which, I noticed you use the East Track for your morning runs. Beautiful views of the sunrise from there." It was a calculated revelation. Emily had indeed observed Wilson's morning routine, but Wilson had no way of knowing she was being watched. The implications of such surveillance would now prey on Wilson's mind, creating exactly the kind of psychological pressure Emily intended. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Wilson's face before her professional mask reasserted itself. "Yes, it's quite lovely. Perhaps you'd care to join me sometime." "I prefer to run alone," Emily replied, "but I appreciate the invitation." She moved on, leaving Carter and Wilson to digest the interaction. The seeds of doubt had been planted. Now she would watch them grow. The exercise continued throughout the day with various crisis scenarios introduced to test the trainees' ability to maintain cover under pressure. By late afternoon, when Emily finally called an end to the day's activities, the strain of sustained role-playing was evident on most faces. As the trainees filed out, Colonel Reynolds joined Emily in reviewing her notes. "Initial impressions?" he asked. Emily handed him her clipboard. "Three potential candidates matching James's warning. Wilson is the most obvious. Her cover performance is too good, too practiced. Richards showed suspicious behavior during the exercise, potentially transmitting information. And there's a third Harper who's been deliberately unobtrusive, but has positioned herself to overhear key conversations throughout the day." Reynolds scanned her detailed observations. "What's your next move?" "Escalation," Emily replied. "Tomorrow we introduce a security breach scenario. Those with hidden agendas will respond differently than those legitimately invested in the exercise." Reynolds nodded, returning the clipboard. "And if you confirm your suspicions..." Emily's expression remained neutral, but her eyes hardened. "Then we give them exactly what James wants. A chance to reveal themselves completely." "Be careful, Emily," Reynolds cautioned. "If there really are 3 Soviet assets in this program, they are likely aware that they're being hunted. Cornered animals are unpredictable." "So am I," Emily replied softly. "That's what makes me dangerous." As dusk settled over Fort Morrison, Emily stood at the window of her quarters watching the trainees return to their barracks. Somewhere among them walked individuals who had betrayed their country, their oaths, and their colleagues. People willing to sell American secrets to the Soviet Union during one of the most precarious periods of the Cold War. Her hand drifted to her shoulder, tracing the outline of the panther tattoo beneath her clothing. Shadow had marked her not just with ink, but with a responsibility that transcended normal chains of command. Phantom Echo operated in the spaces between official operations in the shadows that even other intelligence agencies feared to explore. And now, after 3 years of silence, James Shadow Blackwood had resurfaced with a warning that couldn't be ignored. 3 Soviet assets at Fort Morrison. 3 traitors in the heart of America's intelligence training program. Emily turned from the window, her decision made. Tomorrow would bring not just escalation, but revelation. It was time to flush the enemy into the open, whatever the cost. The chess pieces were in motion. The game had begun in earnest, and Emily Mercer played to win. The sun had not yet risen when Emily began her preparations. She moved with practiced efficiency in the pre-dawn darkness, laying out equipment with the methodical precision that had become second nature after years of operations. A Browning high-power 9mm pistol, not standard military issue, but a weapon she trusted from countless field operations. A Ka-bar combat knife, its 7-inch blade honed to razor sharpness. A slender garrote wire concealed within what appeared to be an ordinary leather watch band. Tools of a trade few acknowledged existed. Today would be different from the carefully controlled exercises of the previous day. Today she would create conditions of genuine stress and uncertainty, the kind that forced people to reveal their true nature, their true loyalties. As she secured the pistol in a shoulder holster beneath her jacket, a soft knock sounded at her door. She recognized the pattern. 3 quick taps, a pause, then 2 more. General Mercer's signal. "Enter," she called softly. Robert Mercer stepped inside, already fully dressed in his uniform despite the early hour. His face was grave, the lines around his eyes deeper than usual. "We've received another message from James," he said without preamble. "More specific this time." Emily paused in her preparations. "When?" "Came through diplomatic channels about an hour ago, coded in the old Phantom Echo cipher." He handed her a folded piece of paper. "I've already decrypted it." Emily unfolded the message, reading the neat block letters: "Black Widow activated. Primary target safe house inventory. Secondary target Echo personnel. Containment compromised. Vienna meeting burned." She read it twice, then looked up at Mercer. Black Widow was a sleeper protocol. Deep cover Soviet assets activated only in critical circumstances. Mercer nodded. "The safe house inventory. The complete list of our covert facilities in Eastern Europe," Emily finished, "including the names of assets being sheltered there." She folded the message carefully. "If that information falls into Soviet hands, dozens of people die. Mercer said grimly, and our intelligence operations behind the Iron Curtain collapsed completely. Emily's mind was already racing, calculating implications and responses. The Vienna meeting being burned means James has been compromised. He wouldn't have canceled otherwise. There's more, Mercer said, his voice dropping lower. Surveillance picked up unusual radio traffic last night, encrypted but using frequencies we know the Soviets favor for field operations. Here at Fort Morrison. Yes, brief transmission, impossible to pinpoint exactly, but definitely originating from somewhere on base. Emily absorbed this, adding it to her mental map of the situation. They're communicating with handlers, preparing for something. The question is what, Mercer replied, and when. Emily resumed checking her equipment, movements more deliberate now. Today, she said with certainty, they know we're on to them. James's appearance in Berlin, my sudden promotion from trainee to advisor. They can read the signs. They'll move before we can identify them. Then we need to pull the exercise. Lock down the base, interrogate everyone. Emily shook her head. That would only drive them deeper underground. We need them to act to expose themselves. She secured the knife in an ankle sheath hidden beneath her pant leg. We proceed as planned, but with heightened security. I want plainclothes security personnel positioned throughout the facility. No one enters or leaves the base without direct authorization from you or Colonel Reynolds. Mercer studied his wife's face, recognizing the cold determination that had settled over her features. You're using yourself as bait, he said. It wasn't a question. I'm the most obvious threat to their operation, Emily replied matter-of-factly. If they want to complete their mission, they need to neutralize me first. And Mercer began his professional detachment, slipping for a moment. This is what I was trained for, Robert. She cut him off gently but firmly. What we both signed up for. A heavy silence filled the room, laden with the unspoken concerns and shared history. Finally, Mercer nodded, his military bearing reasserting itself. I'll arrange the additional security, he said, but I want you wearing this. He withdrew a small device from his pocket, a transmitter disguised as an ordinary pen. Continuous channel to my position. Anything goes wrong, you activate it immediately. Emily accepted the device, tucking it into her breast pocket. Agreed. As Mercer turned to leave, Emily called after him. Robert? He paused at the door, looking back. Be careful. If there are 3 assets here, one of them could be someone close to you. His expression hardened. I've trusted exactly 3 people in my entire career, he replied. James, you, and Colonel Reynolds. 2 of you I married. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. My judgment may be questionable, but it's consistent. After he left, Emily completed her preparations with renewed focus. Today would bring matters to a head one way or another. By nightfall, she would either have exposed the Soviet assets or be dead. In her line of work, there were rarely other outcomes. The conference exercise resumed at 0800 hours, but with a significant change in scenario. As the trainees assembled in their civilian attire, Emily addressed them from the podium, her manner brisk and authoritative. Ladies and gentlemen, there has been a development overnight that affects our proceedings. Intelligence reports indicate a security breach within our conference. Classified documents related to NATO defense strategies have gone missing, and we have reason to believe the perpetrator is among us. A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. The trainees exchanged glances, some confused, others calculating. Emily noted each reaction, cataloging the subtle tells that distinguish genuine surprise from feigned shock. As conference security coordinator, she continued using her cover role. I will be conducting interviews with each delegate throughout the day. Your cooperation is mandatory. Until the security breach is resolved, no one leaves the facility. Carter raised his hand, his expression skeptical. Is this part of the exercise or a real situation? Emily fixed him with a steady gaze. Consider it both, Lieutenant. Your performance during this crisis will be evaluated as part of your final assessment, but the security protocols we're implementing are very real. She didn't mention the plainclothes security personnel now positioned throughout the building or the discreet reinforcement of the base's perimeter security. Let the trainees and any hostile assets among them believe this was still primarily a training scenario. We will proceed with scheduled conference activities while interviews are conducted, Emily instructed. Ms. Harrington, she addressed Wilson using her cover name, as British delegation lead, you'll be first. Please join me in the consultation room in 5 minutes. Wilson nodded, her expression perfectly composed. Of course. As the trainees dispersed to their assigned roles, Emily caught Parker watching her intently. He approached as the room cleared, keeping his voice low. This isn't just an exercise anymore, is it? He asked. Emily assessed him quickly. Parker had shown no suspicious behavior during her observations, and his reaction to discovering her tattoo had been genuine shock, not calculated response. If she needed an ally among the trainees, he was the most likely candidate. Be observant today, Lieutenant, she said quietly. Watch for anyone attempting to access the communications building or attempting to leave the base. Report directly to me, no one else. Parker's expression sobered as he realized the implications. Yes, ma'am. The consultation room was a small office adjacent to the main conference area, furnished with a table, 2 chairs, and little else. Emily had positioned herself with her back to the wall, facing the door, a basic security precaution that had become instinct. Wilson entered precisely on time, her movements graceful and controlled. She took the seat across from Emily, crossing her legs at the ankle in a posture of relaxed attentiveness. I presume this security breach is your way of escalating the exercise, Wilson said, a hint of amusement in her voice. Clever approach, creates natural tension among the participants. Emily laid a folder on the table between them. Let's dispense with the pretense, Lieutenant. This isn't about the exercise anymore. Wilson's expression didn't change, but Emily noticed the slight adjustment in her posture, a subtle straightening of the spine, a minute shift in weight distribution, preparing for potential action. I'm not sure I understand, Wilson replied, her tone still casual but with an underlying wariness. Emily opened the folder, revealing surveillance photographs of Wilson entering the communications building the previous night, long after her authorized access should have ended. You accessed the secure communications room at 0217 hours, Emily stated. You remained inside for approximately 22 minutes. No communication logs were filed. No access authorization was recorded. Wilson studied the photographs, her composure remarkable. I couldn't sleep. I thought I'd check messages from command. The night duty officer let me in as a professional courtesy. The night duty officer denies seeing you. Then he's mistaken. Or lying. Wilson leaned forward slightly. What exactly are you implying, Captain Mercer? Emily kept her expression neutral, watching for the micro-expressions that might betray Wilson's true thoughts. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. You accessed secure communications without authorization. You've been observed passing notes to Lieutenant Richards during the exercise. And your background file contains discrepancies that warrant further investigation. Discrepancies. For the first time, a flicker of genuine concern crossed Wilson's features. Your brother's military record, Emily said, the one who supposedly died in Vietnam. There's no record of a Wilson serving in the unit you claimed during the time period you specified. It was a calculated lie. Emily had found no such discrepancy, but the accusation would force Wilson to either defend a fabricated background or reveal that she knew it would withstand scrutiny. Wilson's response was measured. My brother served under our stepfather's name, Parker, Timothy Parker. Check those records and you'll find everything exactly as I've stated. Emily made a show of writing the name down, though she already knew there was indeed a Timothy Parker who had died in Vietnam in 1968. Wilson had smoothly evaded the trap, which told Emily everything she needed to know. I'll verify that, Emily said, closing the folder. In the meantime, you are restricted to the conference area and barracks. No communications access, no perimeter proximity. Wilson smiled thinly. Am I under arrest, Captain? Consider it administrative leave pending investigation. Emily stood, signaling the end of the interview. One more question, Lieutenant. Have you ever heard of an operation called Black Widow? The name landed like a stone dropped in still water. Wilson's reaction was almost imperceptible. Just the slightest tightening around the eyes, a momentary pause in her breathing. To anyone without Emily's training, it would have been invisible. But to Emily, it was as revealing as a confession. I can't say that I have, Wilson replied, her voice perfectly steady. Sounds like something from a spy novel. Emily nodded. That will be all for now, Lieutenant. After Wilson left, Emily remained in the consultation room, reviewing her notes from the interview. Wilson was good, exceptionally well-trained and disciplined, but she had reacted to Black Widow, which confirmed Emily's suspicions. The question now was whether Wilson was working alone or in concert with others. Emily conducted similar interviews with other trainees throughout the morning, paying particular attention to Richards and Harper, the two others she had flagged as suspicious. Richards displayed nervous energy that could be attributed either to guilt or simple anxiety about being questioned. Harper remained composed but oddly detached, answering questions with minimal elaboration. By midday, Emily had compiled detailed observations on each trainee, but had not yet forced a definitive reaction from any of the suspects. She needed to increase the pressure to create circumstances that would compel action rather than continued evasion. The opportunity came during the afternoon session. The trainees had gathered for a panel discussion on international finance, a tedious cover for continued observation. Emily noticed Wilson slip out of the room, ostensibly heading toward the restroom. 5 minutes later, Richards followed, taking a different exit. Emily waited 30 seconds, then trailed Richards. As she had suspected, he didn't go to the restroom, but instead headed toward the administration building. She followed at a distance, observing as he entered a side door. Rather than pursuing him immediately, she circled around to cover the other exits, anticipating his next move. Her patience was rewarded when Richards emerged from a rear service entrance 10 minutes later, moving with purposeful haste toward the communications building. Emily intercepted him at a point where the path narrowed between two structures, stepping directly into his path. "Lieutenant Richards," she said calmly, "I believe you're supposed to be in the conference session." Richards startled visibly, his hand instinctively moving toward his waistband before he caught himself. "Captain Mercer, I was just getting some air. The financial discussions are rather dry." With this, Emily held up a folded paper she had palmed during their encounter, a requisition form for communications equipment that had fallen partly from his pocket. Richards's expression shifted from surprise to calculation. "That's not what you think, isn't it?" Emily took a step closer. "Because it looks like authorization to access the secure transmission equipment, signed by Colonel Reynolds." She studied the paper more closely. "Except Colonel Reynolds doesn't form his R like this. A good forgery, but not perfect." Richards's demeanor changed entirely. The nervous trainee vanished, replaced by a man with cold, assessing eyes and a fighter's stance. "You're making a mistake, Mercer." "I don't think so," Emily replied, maintaining her calm exterior while shifting her own weight, subtly preparing for potential violence. "Black Widow is blown, Richards. We know everything. The communications, the targets, all of it. It's over." For a moment, she thought he might surrender, might realize the futility of his position. Instead, he lunged forward with surprising speed, driving his shoulder into her midsection while simultaneously reaching for her throat. Emily had anticipated the attack. She sidestepped, using his momentum against him, and delivered a precise strike to his solar plexus. Richards doubled over, gasping, but recovered quickly. He was well trained in hand-to-hand combat, not the standard military curriculum, but something more refined and lethal. They exchanged a flurry of blows in the narrow passage between buildings, each testing the other's defenses. Richards fought with the desperate efficiency of a man who knew failure meant death or worse. Emily matched him with the cold precision that had made Phantom Echo operatives legendary. The fight ended abruptly when Richards made a critical mistake, overextending on a strike that left his side exposed. Emily exploited the opening, ruthlessly driving the edge of her hand into his throat with calculated force. Not enough to kill, but sufficient to incapacitate. Richards dropped to his knees, clutching his throat, unable to speak or cry out. Emily quickly secured his hands behind his back with plastic restraints she carried in her pocket. "Like I said," she told the gasping man, "it's over." She activated the transmitter pen, speaking calmly into it. "Asset 1 secured at the north corridor of the administration building. Extraction team needed." Within minutes, 2 of the plainclothes security personnel Mercer had positioned around the base arrived to take custody of Richards. Emily handed them the forged requisition form. "He was attempting to access the communications center," she explained. "Full isolation protocols. No contact with anyone except General Mercer or myself." As the security team led Richards away, Emily returned to the conference building. Her senses heightened. 1 down, 2 to go, and the remaining assets would now know their operation was compromised. She re-entered the conference room to find the financial panel still underway, the droning presentations providing perfect cover for her to scan the room. Wilson had returned to her seat, her expression attentive, but revealing nothing. Harper sat near the back, apparently taking notes but watching the door rather than the presenters. Emily caught Parker's eye from across the room, giving him a subtle nod. He returned the gesture, understanding her signal to remain vigilant. The afternoon proceeded without further incident, the mundane conference activities continuing while tension built beneath the surface. By 1700 hours, when the day's sessions concluded, Emily could feel the strain in the room. Not just from the trainees legitimately engaged in the exercise, but from the Soviet assets, who must now realize their window of opportunity was closing. As the trainees dispersed for dinner, Emily intercepted Harper in the hallway. "Lieutenant Harper, a moment of your time." Harper paused, her nondescript features arranged in an expression of mild inquiry. "Yes, Captain?" "I'd like your assistance with some documentation for tomorrow's sessions," Emily said, gesturing toward the administrative offices. "It won't take long." Harper hesitated, then nodded. "Of course." They walked in silence to a small office Emily had requisitioned earlier. Inside, a table held stacks of conference materials, a plausible reason for requesting Harper's help. Emily closed the door behind them, then moved to the far side of the table, maintaining distance between herself and Harper. "I understand you served in Army intelligence before this program." Emily began conversationally, watching Harper's body language closely. "That's correct. 2 years with the 525th Military Intelligence Brigade." Harper's answers were concise, professional, perfectly appropriate for a junior officer addressing a superior. "Interesting," Emily replied, "because according to Colonel Reynolds, the 525th has no record of your service with them." Harper's expression didn't change, but Emily noted the slight tension in her shoulders, the almost imperceptible shift in her breathing pattern. "There must be some mistake," Harper said. "My service record is clear." "Yes, it is," Emily agreed. "Too clear, in fact. No disciplinary issues, no conflicts with superiors, no failed assignments. A perfect record is as suspicious as a problematic one. Lieutenant, real soldiers make mistakes. They have disagreements. They fail occasionally." Harper remained silent, her eyes never leaving Emily's face. "We've detained Richards," Emily continued, pressing her advantage. "He's being questioned now. It's only a matter of time before he confirms what we already suspect about you and Wilson." "I don't know what you're talking about," Harper replied, her voice steady but with a new edge of wariness. Emily moved slightly, positioning herself between Harper and the door. "Black Widow, Lieutenant. Ring any bells?" The change was instantaneous. Harper's entire demeanor transformed, the unassuming intelligence officer vanishing as if she had removed a mask. Her posture straightened, her eyes hardened, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a slight but unmistakable Russian accent. "You've made a miscalculation, Captain Mercer," she said coldly. "Richards knows nothing about me. His controller is entirely separate from mine." Emily hadn't expected such a direct admission. The fact that Harper had abandoned her cover so quickly suggested either supreme confidence or desperate calculation. "Then you understand your situation is untenable," Emily replied. "Surrender now and cooperation will be taken into consideration." Harper laughed, a short, harsh sound without humor. "Cooperation. We both know that's not how this works. The moment I confirm anything, I become expendable to both sides." She reached slowly into her jacket, her movements deliberate. Emily tensed, ready to defend herself, but instead of a weapon, Harper withdrew a small photograph. "Before you decide my fate," Harper said, "you should know what you're really involved in." She slid the photograph across the table. Emily glanced down without taking her eyes fully off Harper. The photo showed James Shadow Blackwood standing beside a man Emily recognized immediately, Alexei Petrov, a high-ranking KGB officer. They were shaking hands, their expressions suggesting not hostility, but collaboration. "Your mentor," Harper said, watching Emily's reaction closely. "The great Shadow Blackwood. Did you never wonder why he disappeared 3 years ago? Why he's only now resurfacing?" Emily kept her expression neutral, though her mind raced with implications. "This proves nothing. Context is everything in our business. This could be from an authorized exchange, a prisoner swap, any number of legitimate operations." "Is that what you need to believe?" Harper's voice held something like pity. "Black Widow wasn't activated to steal your precious safe house inventory, Captain. It was activated because Blackwood, himself ordered it. The claim was so outrageous that Emily almost laughed. You expect me to believe James is working for the Soviets? That the most decorated covert operative in American history has turned traitor? Not a traitor, Harper corrected. A realist. The Cold War is a game played by old men sending young ones to die. Blackwood saw through it. He's working for something beyond national interest now. Emily's instincts screamed that this was manipulation, a desperate attempt by Harper to create confusion and division. And yet, James's sudden reappearance after 3 years of silence, the cryptic messages, the warning about 3 assets when he could have simply named them, doubts she had suppressed began to surface. Even if that were true, Emily said carefully, it changes nothing about your situation. You're still a Soviet asset on an American military base. Your operation is compromised. Harper sighed as if disappointed by Emily's response. I had hoped for better from you. Blackwood always said you were the one who could see beyond the limitations of patriotism, that you understood the greater game. Her hand moved again, this time toward her collar. Emily tensed, but Harper merely unfastened the top button of her blouse, revealing the edge of a tattoo on her collarbone, a design Emily recognized instantly, the same shattered compass that formed part of her own tattoo. He trained me too, Harper said softly. After you, in Prague, 1973. I was his last student before he disappeared. Emily felt as if the floor had shifted beneath her feet. The implications were staggering. Either Harper was telling the truth, which meant James had betrayed everything he claimed to stand for, or this was an elaborate deception using information the Soviets had somehow obtained about Phantom Echo. If what you're saying is true, Emily said, fighting to maintain her composure, then surrender to me now. Let me take you to General Mercer. Together we can make sense of this. Harper shook her head sadly. It's too late for that. By now, Wilson has already completed what Richards couldn't. The transmission is sent. The operation is complete. As if on cue, an alarm began blaring throughout the base, the signal for a security breach. Emily's hand moved instinctively to the transmitter pen, but before she could activate it, Harper lunged across the table with startling speed. The fight was brief but vicious. Harper fought with the same distinctive style that Shadow had taught Emily. Economical movements designed to incapacitate rather than kill targets, selected for maximum effect with minimum effort. It was like fighting a mirror image, each anticipating the other's moves before they were made. In the end, what separated them wasn't skill, but conviction. When the opening came, a momentary overextension on Harper's part, Emily struck without hesitation, driving the heel of her hand upward into Harper's chin with precise force. Harper dropped unconscious before she hit the floor. Emily secured her quickly, then activated the transmitter. Asset 2 neutralized. Office 3 in the administration building. Medical attention required. She paused, making a decision. And Robert, we need to talk about James. The command center had been established in the base's secure bunker, a relic of earlier Cold War paranoia that now served a critical purpose. Emily stood before a wall of monitors displaying security feeds from throughout Fort Morrison, her expression grim as she watched teams of security personnel conducting a thorough sweep of the facility. General Mercer entered his uniform immaculate despite the chaos of the past hour. Richards is talking, he announced without preamble. Confirms he was tasked with sending intelligence about our Eastern European operations to a handler in East Berlin. Claims he's been a Soviet asset since 1974, recruited during a temporary assignment in West Germany. And Harper, Emily asked. Still unconscious. Medical team says she'll recover, but she took a significant blow. A hint of professional admiration colored his voice. Your handiwork, I assume. Emily nodded absently, her mind still processing Harper's revelations about James. What about Wilson? Have we located her? Mercer's expression darkened. That's why I came. She's barricaded herself in the communications center with 2 hostages, the duty officer and a technician. She's demanding safe passage off the base. Has she sent any transmissions? None that we've detected, but we can't be certain. The equipment in that room could send a burst transmission that our monitors might miss. Emily studied the security feed showing the exterior of the communications building. I want to talk to her. Absolutely not, Mercer said firmly. We have a tactical team assembling now. They'll handle the situation. A tactical assault risks the hostages, Emily countered. And if Wilson hasn't yet transmitted whatever intelligence she's after pushing her into a corner, guarantees she'll send it before she's taken down. So what do you propose, walking in there alone, giving her another hostage, a high-value one at that? Emily turned to face her husband fully. I'm proposing I do what I was trained to do, what James taught me to do. Mercer held her gaze for a long moment, professional judgment warring with personal concern. Finally, he nodded once, a sharp military acknowledgement of her expertise. On one condition, he said, you wear a wire, and at the first sign this is going south, I'm sending in the tactical team, hostages be damned. Agreed, Emily replied, but there's something you need to know first. She hesitated, then pressed on. Harper made some claims about James, about his loyalties. Mercer's expression didn't change, but Emily knew him well enough to see the slight tightening around his eyes. What kind of claims? That he's working with the Soviets, that he activated Black Widow himself. She paused. She showed me a photograph of James with Alexei Petrov, and she has the Phantom Echo tattoo. A heavy silence fell between them. Mercer's face revealed nothing, but his posture had become rigid, his bearing more formal, a retreat into military discipline in the face of disturbing information. Do you believe her? He finally asked. I don't know, Emily admitted. It could be an elaborate deception, but it would explain James's sudden reappearance, the cryptic messages. Or it could be exactly what it appears to be, a desperate attempt to create confusion and division at a critical moment. Mercer's voice was steady, reasonable. Focus on Wilson for now. We'll deal with Harper's claims afterward. Emily nodded, though the doubts remained. She allowed the security team to fit her with a concealed microphone, tested the equipment, then prepared to enter the communications building. Be careful, Mercer said quietly as she turned to leave. The words carried the weight of both professional concern and personal devotion. Always, she replied, their standard exchange before dangerous operations, a ritual that had sustained them through years of separation and risk. The communications building stood isolated from the main complex, a deliberate design choice to minimize the risk of signal interference. As Emily approached the main entrance, she noted the tactical team taking positions around the perimeter, professional, efficient, and currently unnecessary if her plan worked. She stopped at the entrance, standing fully visible in the doorway. Lieutenant Wilson, she called, her voice carrying through the open door. This is Captain Mercer. I'm unarmed and coming in to talk. There was a moment of silence, then Wilson's voice responded from within. Prove you're unarmed. Hands up, turn around slowly. Emily complied, raising her hands and turning in a full circle to demonstrate she carried no visible weapons. She had, in fact, left her pistol behind, though the knife remained concealed in her ankle sheath, a calculated risk. Come in alone, Wilson instructed. Any sign of others and the hostages die. Emily entered slowly, hands still raised. The communications center was a large room filled with radio equipment, teletype machines, and early-generation computers used for encoding and decoding transmissions. Wilson stood at the far end, a pistol held against the head of a terrified young technician. The duty officer lay on the floor nearby, blood seeping from a wound on his temple, but still breathing. That's far enough, Wilson said when Emily had reached the center of the room. You've caused quite a problem, Captain. This could have been so much cleaner. It's over, Wilson, Emily replied, keeping her voice calm and reasonable. Richards and Harper are in custody. The base is locked down. There's no way out of this for you. Wilson laughed, a brittle sound edged with tension. There's always a way out. That's the first rule they teach us. Who is they exactly? Emily asked, slowly lowering her hands to appear less threatening. Your KGB handlers. The ones who abandoned Richards at the first sign of trouble. The ones who will disavow all knowledge of you the moment you're captured. Don't pretend to understand my situation. Wilson snapped her composure, cracking slightly. You with your perfect patriotic narrative, your unquestioning loyalty to a system built on lies. Emily took a careful step forward. Then help me understand. Explain it to me. Wilson's grip on the technician tightened, causing him to whimper in fear. Stay where you are, she warned. I don't need to explain anything to you. All I need is safe passage off this base. A vehicle clear access to the main gate, and these two remain unharmed. You know I can't authorize that, Emily said, but I can offer you something better. Cooperation, protection. A chance to determine your own fate rather than leaving it in the hands of handlers who see you as expendable. Cooperation, Wilson echoed Harper's earlier skepticism. We both know what that means. Interrogation, then disappearance. A nameless grave or a lifetime in some black site prison. No thank you. Emily calculated her next move carefully. Wilson was unraveling the pressure of the situation, eroding her training and discipline. This presented both opportunity and danger. A desperate operative was unpredictable. Harper told me about James, Emily said, introducing a new element to unbalance Wilson further. About his arrangement with Petrov. About the real purpose of Black Widow. Wilson's expression flickered with surprise, then suspicion. What are you talking about? You don't know, do you? Emily pressed her advantage. You're just a pawn, following orders without understanding the larger game. Harper at least knows who she's really working for. I know exactly who I work for, Wilson retorted, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. Do you? Emily took another step forward. Because according to Harper, this entire operation was orchestrated by an American, James Blackwood, the man who trained me, the legendary Shadow. Wilson's eyes narrowed in disbelief. That's absurd. Blackwood is a myth, a boogeyman American intelligence invented to explain their failures. He's very real, Emily assured her. And if Harper is telling the truth, he's been playing both sides for years, which means you've been risking your life for an operation that doesn't serve the cause you think it does. The seed of doubt was planted. Emily could see it taking root in Wilson's expression, in the slight relaxation of her grip on the hostage. Uncertainty was a powerful weapon against those trained to operate with absolute conviction. Even if that were true, Wilson said, struggling to regain her composure, it changes nothing about my current situation. I still need to get off this base. And go where? Emily asked. Back to handlers who may already be compromised, who may have been working for someone other than Soviet intelligence all along. She paused, then added, or you can put down the weapon, release the hostages, and help us understand what's really happening. Wilson's resolve was visibly weakening, the psychological pressure taking its toll. But just as Emily thought she might be breaking through, a commotion outside shattered the moment. Raised voices, the sound of running feet. Wilson's training reasserted itself instantly. Her expression hardened, her grip on the hostage tightened, and the pistol pressed more firmly against the technician's temple. No more talking, she said coldly. You have 30 seconds to clear me a path out of here, or this man dies. Then the officer. Then you. Before Emily could respond, the door behind her burst open. She turned to see Parker entering, his expression urgent. Captain Mercer, he called, apparently oblivious to the danger. General Mercer sent me to tell you. The distraction was all Emily needed. As Wilson's attention shifted momentarily to the new arrival, Emily lunged forward, covering the distance between them with explosive speed. She struck Wilson's gun arm at the wrist, deflecting the weapon away from the hostage, while simultaneously driving her other hand into Wilson's solar plexus. Wilson gasped, doubling over, but recovered quickly. She abandoned the hostage, focusing her full attention on Emily. The two women engaged in a brutal close-quarters struggle, each seeking advantage in the confined space. Wilson fought with desperation born of knowing capture meant certain death, either at the hands of her interrogators or by her own handlers if they believed she might talk. Emily fought with the cold precision of someone who had spent years preparing for exactly this kind of confrontation. The difference was marginal but decisive. When Wilson attempted a complex joint lock that would have disabled a less experienced opponent, Emily recognized the move and countered it using Wilson's own momentum to throw her off balance. As Wilson stumbled, Emily delivered a precise strike to the base of her skull, not enough to kill but sufficient to render her unconscious. Wilson collapsed, the pistol clattering from her hand. Emily kicked it away, then quickly secured Wilson's hands behind her back. Only then did she turn to Parker, who stood watching with a mixture of awe and shock. Perfect timing, Lieutenant, she said, slightly breathless from the exertion. Though next time consider knocking. Parker seemed to shake himself from his stupor. That wasn't planned. I really was sent to tell you something. Emily's attention sharpened. What is it? It's Harper, Parker said. She's escaped custody, took down 2 guards, and she left a message for you. What message? Ask your husband about Vienna 1970. Parker looked confused. Does that mean something to you, Vienna 1970? The operation where Emily had first met Robert Mercer, where James had introduced them, setting in motion the relationship that would become the most stable element in her chaotic life. Yes, Emily said quietly, it means something. After ensuring the hostages were receiving medical attention and Wilson was securely in custody, Emily made her way back to the command center. Her mind worked furiously trying to reconcile Harper's escape with her claims about James and now this cryptic reference to Vienna. General Mercer was coordinating the search for Harper when Emily entered his manner focused and professional. When he saw her, a brief flash of relief crossed his features before his military bearing reasserted itself. Wilson, he asked. Secured, Emily replied. No casualties beyond the duty officer's head wound, which appears superficial. No transmissions were sent from the communication center. Mercer nodded, turning back to the security feeds. Good work. Now we just need to recapture Harper. She can't have gone far. The base is locked down, all personnel accounted for except her. Emily studied her husband's profile, looking for any sign of deception or concern beyond the professional demands of the situation. Parker delivered Harper's message. Mercer didn't turn from the monitors. In my Vienna 1970. Emily watched him carefully. She said to ask you about it. For a moment, Mercer went completely still, a reaction so subtle that only someone intimately familiar with his mannerisms would have noticed. Then he sighed, his shoulders dropping slightly. Not here, he said quietly. My office. 5 minutes. Emily nodded, understanding that whatever he had to say wasn't for the ears of the security team surrounding them. She left the command center, making her way through the now quiet corridors of the administrative building to Mercer's temporary office. The room was spartanly furnished, a desk, 2 chairs, a filing cabinet, and not much else. Military efficiency at its most basic. Emily closed the door behind her, then waited standing rather than sitting, her posture betraying the tension she felt. Mercer arrived precisely 5 minutes later, closing and locking the door behind him. He crossed to the window, looking out at the darkened base, his back to Emily. Vienna was where we met, he said finally, where James introduced us. But there was more to that operation than you knew, than either of us knew at the time. Emily remained silent, waiting for him to continue. James was running multiple operations simultaneously, Mercer went on. The official one, extracting the East German physicist, and something else, something unauthorized. He met with Petrov there, just as Harper claimed. You knew about this? Emily's voice was carefully neutral. Mercer turned to face her. Not then. I discovered it 2 years later when I was assigned to counterintelligence. Found surveillance photos that had been buried in the archives. James with Petrov exchanging what appeared to be documents. And you never told me. It wasn't a question. What was I supposed to say? That your mentor, the man who shaped you into who you are, might be playing both sides. That the foundation of your entire career might be built on deception. Mercer's expression was pained. I investigated further, found other instances, other meetings, but never enough evidence to determine what he was actually doing. Emily absorbed this, her mind recalibrating everything she thought she knew. And now with James resurfacing with these warnings about Black Widow. Now I don't know what to believe, Mercer admitted. Is he warning us about a legitimate Soviet operation? Or is this part of some deeper game he's playing, has been playing for decades? The question hung in the air between them, unanswerable with the information they currently possessed. Emily moved to the desk, resting her hands on its surface, needing the physical stability as her conceptual world shifted. Harper's escape, she said finally. Could she have had help? Mercer's expression darkened. You mean from inside our own security team? It's possible. The reports describe her taking down 2 trained guards with surprising ease. Or she's better trained than we anticipated. Emily straightened, decision made. We need to find her before she makes contact with whoever she's working for, whether that's Soviet intelligence or James himself. The base is locked down, Mercer reminded her. Every building is being searched methodically. It's only a matter of time. Unless she's already gone, Emily countered. There are ways off this base that don't involve the main gates. Maintenance tunnels, emergency access points. She paused. Places someone with inside knowledge would know about. Mercer's expression sharpened. You have something specific in mind. The old bunker complex on the North Ridge, decommissioned in '67 but never fully sealed. There's an access tunnel that leads beyond the perimeter fence. How do you know about that? Emily's lips curved in a grim smile. I make it my business to know every entry and exit point of any facility I operate in. It's what James taught me. Mercer nodded, accepting her explanation. I'll assemble a team. No, Emily cut him off. Harper will be watching for that. I go alone. If she's there, she'll be more likely to engage with just me. And if it's a trap, then springing it is the fastest way to get answers. Mercer studied her face, recognizing the determination that had made her such an effective operative. 1 hour, he said finally. If you haven't reported back by then, I send in everything we have. Emily nodded, accepting the compromise. 1 hour. The North Ridge rose behind Fort Morrison like a protective spine, its slopes covered in pine forests that appeared black in the darkness. Emily moved through the trees with practiced stealth, using natural cover and staying off established paths. She had changed into dark combat fatigues, her face blackened with camouflage paint, every piece of equipment secured to prevent noise. The entrance to the old bunker complex was concealed behind a growth of juniper bushes, the steel door rusted but still functional. Emily approached cautiously, scanning for signs of recent passage. In the soft earth before the entrance, she found what she was looking for. Fresh footprints, a single set heading inward. Drawing her knife, the only weapon she had brought, Emily eased the door open, wincing at the creak of neglected hinges. The passage beyond was pitch black, the air stale and heavy, with the scent of damp concrete and rusting metal. She activated a small penlight, keeping the beam pointed downward to minimize its visibility. The tunnel stretched ahead, descending into the ridge at a gentle slope. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness, the sound echoing eerily. Emily moved forward, every sense alert for signs of ambush or surveillance. She had traveled perhaps 100 yards when she detected it, a faint glow ahead, suggesting artificial light. Someone was indeed using the bunker. Emily extinguished her own light, allowing her eyes to adjust to the near-total darkness as she continued forward, guided now by touch and memory. The tunnel eventually opened into a larger chamber, the main command area of the old bunker complex. Emily pressed herself against the wall beside the entrance, listening intently. From within, she could hear movement, someone walking on concrete, the occasional metallic sound of equipment being handled. Taking a slow, deep breath, Emily made her decision. She stepped into the doorway, knife held ready, but not raised aggressively. That's far enough, Harper. The figure at the far end of the room turned slowly. In the dim light provided by a single battery-powered lamp, Harper's features were shadowed, her expression unreadable. I wondered if you'd figure it out, Harper said, her voice echoing slightly in the concrete chamber. The tunnel, I mean. Not many people know about this place. James taught us both to always know our escape routes, Emily replied, remaining in the doorway, maintaining distance between them. Just as he taught us to anticipate each other's moves. Harper nodded, acknowledging the point. Which is why this conversation was inevitable. Why I left that message. Vienna, 1970, Emily said. Mercer told me about seeing the surveillance photos. About James meeting with Petrov. Did he tell you everything? Harper asked. About the operation, about what James was really doing there. Why don't you tell me your version? Harper gestured to a metal table where several folders lay open. I brought proof, documents James entrusted to me before he disappeared. The complete record of his activities. Activities that neither American nor Soviet intelligence fully understood. Emily remained where she was, suspicion warring with curiosity. Why would he give such sensitive material to you? For the same reason he gave you that broken compass, Harper replied, because he saw something in me, a capacity to understand the larger game. Slowly maintaining awareness of her surroundings and potential threats, Emily approached the table. The documents appeared genuine, operation reports, surveillance photos, handwritten notes in James's distinctive style. But it was a photograph at the bottom of the stack that captured her attention. It showed James standing with a group of men Emily didn't recognize. Not military, not intelligence operatives by their bearing and dress. They appeared to be scientists or academics gathered around what looked like technical schematics. Who are they? Emily asked, not touching the photograph. Physicists, mathematicians, computer scientists. Harper moved to stand opposite her across the table. From both sides of the Iron Curtain, men who understood that the Cold War was driving humanity toward extinction. Emily looked up sharply. What are you saying? James wasn't betraying his country. Harper explained, her voice taking on a passionate intensity. He was trying to save it, save everyone. He built a network of scientists and intelligence operatives who shared information, who worked to prevent the worst excesses of both superpowers. A shadow organization, Emily said skeptically, operating across international boundaries without oversight or accountability. Operating beyond the short-sighted politics that push us constantly toward the brink of nuclear annihilation, Harper countered. Think about it, Emily. How many near misses have we had? How many times have we come to the edge of a war that would destroy civilization? James saw a different path. Emily's mind raced, evaluating this new information against everything she knew about Shadow Blackwood. His disillusionment with political leadership had been evident even in Vietnam. His belief that operatives on the ground understood realities that politicians in Washington could never grasp. Was it so unbelievable that he might have extended that thinking to its logical conclusion? If what you're saying is true, Emily said carefully, then what was Black Widow really about? Why the warnings about Soviet assets at Fort Morrison? Harper sighed, suddenly looking weary, because not everyone in James's network shares his vision of cooperation. Some, particularly in the KGB, saw an opportunity to gain advantage. They recruited assets like Wilson and Richards independently outside the network's knowledge or control. And you, oh, I was recruited directly by James, just as you were, trained to operate in the spaces between official missions, to serve a higher purpose than national interest. Emily studied Harper's face, looking for signs of deception. She found none, only the same absolute conviction that had characterized James himself. Why are you telling me this now? Emily asked. Why reveal everything when you could have simply escaped? Because James needs you, Harper replied simply. The network is fracturing. The hardliners in Moscow are pushing for advantage. The Vienna meeting wasn't just burned, it was targeted. Someone tried to kill James. Who? We don't know yet. Could be KGB elements operating independently. Could be someone from your side who discovered the network's existence. Harper leaned forward intently. What we do know is that James trusts you above all others. He believes you're the only one who can help rebuild what's being destroyed. Emily stepped back from the table, needing physical distance to process these revelations. Everything she had believed about her career, about James's disappearance, about the nature of the Cold War itself, all of it was being challenged. I need proof, she said finally, not just documents that could be forged, not just claims about James's intentions, something incontrovertible. Harper reached into her pocket, withdrawing a small object that gleamed dully in the lamplight. A compass, identical to the one James had given Emily years ago in that Vietnamese jungle. Its glass was shattered in exactly the same pattern, its needle still pointing unerringly north. He gave this to me, Harper said softly. Told me the same story he told you, about Korea, about broken things still functioning. She held it out. Look at the back. Emily took the compass cautiously. Turning it over, she found an inscription she knew hadn't been on her own Vienna, October 12th of midnight. Come alone. A message, she asked, looking up at Harper. An invitation, Harper corrected, to join the network, to help James finish what he started. And if I refuse, if I turn you and report everything you have told me. Harper shrugged, seemingly unconcerned. Then you'll never know the truth, and James will find another way forward, as he always has. Emily turned the compass over in her hand, feeling its weight, not just the physical object, but the decision it represented. Everything in her training, her official oaths, her career pointed toward rejecting Harper's claims, treating this as enemy manipulation. And yet, the compass, the broken glass that still functioned, the lesson James had taught her about strength emerging from damage. Could the same principle apply to the fractured world of international relations? Could cooperation emerge from the broken landscape of the Cold War? One more question, Emily said, her decision not yet made. What about Mercer? Does he know about any of this? Harper's expression softened slightly. No, James kept him entirely separate from the network, protected him from knowledge that would force impossible choices. Why come? Because James knew how much Mercer meant to you, and because some people are too deeply embedded in the existing system to see beyond it. Harper paused. James never doubted Mercer's integrity or patriotism. He simply recognized that not everyone is suited for operating in the gray areas where real progress happens. Emily closed her fingers around the compass, feeling its edges press into her palm. "I need time," she said finally. "Time to verify what I can of your claims. Time to decide." Harper nodded, accepting this. "You have until October 12th. After that, James will assume you've made your choice." She began gathering the documents from the table. "I'm leaving now. I don't expect you to let me go, but I am asking you to consider it as a show of good faith." Emily stood silent for a long moment, weighing options, consequences, loyalties. Finally, she stepped back from the table, creating a clear path to the tunnel that led beyond the base perimeter. "One condition," she said. "Leave the documents, all of them." Harper hesitated, then nodded. "Fair enough." She placed the folders on the table, then moved toward the exit tunnel. At the entrance, she paused, looking back at Emily. "Whatever you decide, remember what James always told us. The truth isn't something you are given. It's something you find for yourself." Then she was gone, her footsteps fading into the darkness of the tunnel. Emily remained motionless, listening until the sound disappeared completely. Only then did she approach the table, gathering the documents Harper had left behind. The broken compass remained in her hand, its needle pointing steadfastly north, despite the shattered glass that protected it. A metaphor perhaps for what she now faced, finding true direction amid the fragments of everything she had believed. Emily secured the documents inside her jacket, then made her way back through the tunnel toward Fort Morrison. She had decisions to make, truths to uncover, and less than 3 weeks to determine which path she would follow. Behind her, the old bunker returned to darkness, its secrets once again buried in shadow, like so many others in the clandestine world where Emily Mercer had spent her life. Like the mark of the panther on her back, some truths remained hidden until circumstances forced them into the light, and once revealed, they could never be unseen. The choice that lay before her now would define not just her future, but potentially the future of a world balanced on the knife edge of destruction, a world where the games of shadows determined the fate of nations, a world where broken things still functioned, sometimes better than before. The shadows had always been Emily Mercer's world, a realm of whispered truths and necessary deceptions. She had worn her tattoo like armor, the Black Panther, a symbol of lethal grace hidden beneath ordinary appearance. Now holding the shattered compass in her palm, she understood what shadow had been teaching her all along. Not just how to disappear, but how to see beyond the boundaries others accepted without question. The price of such vision was steep. A life lived in twilight, relationships tested by secrets, the constant weight of decisions that could never be fully shared, even with those closest to her. The truth about Fort Morrison would remain classified, the files sealed away in Pentagon archives. But the deeper truth about a network of individuals working across Cold War divides would be Emily's burden alone to carry or to share. As dawn broke over the Montana mountains, Emily traced the outline of the panther tattoo beneath her shirt. Some marks run deeper than ink. Some loyalties transcend flags and borders. And sometimes the most powerful choice is rejecting the notion that one must choose at all. What marks do we carry beneath our visible selves? What compasses guide us when the glass shatters but the needle still points true?